And good evening, everyone. So as Al says, I'm Jane Golding, Chair of the Community Archives and Heritage Group, and I'm so pleased to be with you this evening. So a very warm welcome to you all, and thank you for joining. And I'd like to give an extra special welcome to our award winners and their supporters. So we'll be shortly announcing who the winners are, and this really is a very special part of the CARS year. For it's all of you, our members and supporters, that make CARS what it is. And tonight we celebrate innovation and best practice, and also the rich and diverse stories that are brought together by community collections and activities. But before we do that, we first of all have to take care of some necessary business in the form of our AGM. And this year, I'm really pleased to say that we're going to take a slightly different format, because we're going to start with a short film about who we are and what we do. And we made this film over the summer months with the expertise, guidance and brilliance of one of our former award winners, Kirklees Local TV. And we had great fun making the film, and we're very thrilled to be giving its first showing this evening. So if you can then start the film.
Is that happening? Can people see?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's looking good for me.
Sound as well. Here we go.
Right.
The Community Archives and Heritage Group creates conversations between the past and present, enabling us to better understand who we are.
CARS creates spaces where we identify places and belongings that can be historically explored from a perspective of social, cultural inclusivity.
Celebrate the differences and equality within our services, both internally and within our membership outside of the organisation.
Our vision is to see inclusive and sustainable community archives making a difference and creating an enduring legacy across the United Kingdom.
To deliver this vision, we will put groups and their collections at the heart of everything we do. Over the next 3 years, we will continue to celebrate innovation and best practice within our annual award scheme.
Our purpose is to help community archives and heritage groups in the UK and Ireland to celebrate their heritage and culture.
And make the biggest difference they can to communities they live in and serve.
I am a volunteer with the Rainbow Connection, which is part of the Plymouth LGBT archive, so that there is a permanent record of the LGBT community in Plymouth. The Rainbow Connection is an attempt to use the material from the archive in all sorts of different ways to bring the different generations together.
So Gold Diggers was Chippenham's premier nightclub. It opened in 1981. We wanted to show how it was important within the town. We knew that it was a premier nightclub, but we wanted to show its importance within the town.
We have been a member to the Community Archives and Heritage Group since 2019. CARS provides the expertise on where to go, who to talk to, and how to access the resources needed to develop your archive and network.
Well, Birmingham's a unique city, I think, in terms of its diversity of communities, and that's reflected in its music. Hasn't really been celebrated, over the years, so I stepped into a space and just thought I'll do it myself. It was as simple as that. No one's doing it, I'll do it. So it wasn't my history. I wasn't trying to say this is the history of Birmingham. It was very much the community. Tell us what's important to you.
So ICANN is the National Museum of Ireland initiative. It's a community engagement initiative where we work in partnership with other heritage professionals to support community groups at local level to digitise their local history and heritage and share it online on community archive websites.
The Community Archives Heritage Group, it's important for us because it gives us a platform. People might say that this sort of history of a minority really isn't important, but it is. It's as important as it is for any other group, and therefore that's why the overarching organisation is very important to us.
I think it's really important to be able to collect those histories for the people whose history you are collecting. It gives them a sense of a place within that community. Working with CARJ gives our hidden histories a showcase nationally, and it's able to show the importance of archives and local archives on a national level.
We find CARJ to be culturally inclusive, inspiring and informative, both personally and professionally. The scale and diversity of CARJ's archives is phenomenal, and also the expertise comes free. They are transformative in that as a member you can confidently think and be seen nationally whilst working locally and regionally. I think what KLTV brings to CARJ is an eclectic mix of cultures, voices, people and places.
I would sum up CARJ as just this wonderful, enthusiastic, vibrant community of like-minded people that have a knowledge and understanding and empathy for communities on the ground that are trying to develop this kind of work and to provide them with the tools and the resources that they need. CARJ has been a wonderful support of inspiration and motivation to us here in Ireland, so it's great to be able to give back.
What CARJ gives to me and to others, I think, not just myself, is a network of like-minded people, and I think that's the most important thing. It's networks and the expertise that resides within all these amazing, honestly, the incredible amount of work that goes on and the dedication of people.
Over the next 3 years, we want to put groups and their collections at the heart of everything we do.
Contact us now and register on www.communityarchives.org.uk.
Community Archives and Heritage Group, supporting and promoting community archives in the UK and Ireland.
I hope the viewing worked for most people. There were quite a few glitches in there for me. It was certainly stretching my broadband width, but I mean, this is our first showing with so many people on the call. But it's on our website, so please watch it again and it'll look very professional and very slick. We're also going to do a showing of the film at the CARJ Scotland event on climate change on the 10th of November. And Audrey, if you're on the call, if you want to put the details of that booking into the chat, that would be great. Thank you. So I'd like to give a big thank you to Milton, Chris and all the team at KLTV and everyone involved in the production of the film, both in front of the camera and behind the camera. Not only was the film really enjoyable and inspiring to make, it was also the first time that some of us from CARJ have been able to get together in person during this very long and difficult time. So I hope you will watch the film again and enjoy it, and please share it amongst your groups as well. So we're going to go on to the rest of the AGM. I just got a couple of slides there. Great, thank you. So this evening I'm standing down as chair after 3 years in office. So my reflection over the past year, I just want to continue in fact looking at the achievements by thanking everybody who's been involved. So first and foremost, I'd like to thank all of you for being part of CARJ, for contributing to the online directory with details of your projects and activities, for taking part in our events, sharing your stories in the newsletter, joining us on social media, and of course, most importantly, participating in our annual award scheme. Yeah, we're all right with this slide, but I have got a little bit more. I'm not driving my slides, Al's driving the slides with me. Thank you. So over the year, we've continued to pilot our 2 regional networks to explore how we can further support groups on the ground. So thank you to Audrey in Scotland and Donna and Alan in the Southwest for all their hard work in the networks. We'll be evaluating the progress of the pilots and looking at how we can move the networks from a pilot stage into established structure in response to the needs of groups. Nationally, our main method of communication is via our email newsletter, and Ben Earl is our hero here. Ben is ever patient in gathering content from different sources and putting it together into an informative read. Ben is also responsible for adding content to the website, leading our social media activity, helping event bookings, and a whole lot more. And I think, Ben, you're with us tonight, and I just please, like you to accept our thanks because you're a real star. So thanks also to Jack at Community Sites for the website, Elaine for her assistance with social media and putting together our social media strategy, and Tina for shaping our vision statement ready for the website. I hope many of you were able to join us 2 weeks ago for our excellent conference on communities, sustainable environments and heritage. And this was pulled together and organised by Andrew. So thank you, Andrew, for that. And the video, I think, isn't up on the website, but it soon will be. So if you missed it the first time round, you can still catch it. We record, as Alan said, our sessions. And so I'd like to thank Joe for editing those recording and uploading them to YouTube to make them available. So then just finally, a thank you to my fellow officers, Andrew as Vice Chair, Alan as Secretary, and Nick as Treasurer. So thank you for all your hard work, dedication and commitment to CARSH over the past year. And that goes to all members of the committee as well. I'm delighted to say that members are willing to remain on the committee. So we will shortly go to election of the committee, but I'd like to make a final thank you to John Chambers and at the Archives and Record Association, UK and Ireland, for all your support to CARSH. And I'd like to welcome Deborah Mason. I think Deborah is also joining us this evening, who is Communications Manager at ARA. And so thank you, Deborah, for your help with promoting the awards, and we look forward to working with you over the forthcoming year. So on to election of the committee. So I say members are willing to remain on the committee, but we do have some change in the officer roles. So Alan Butler is standing as chair and Donna Morn as secretary. So we would like to elect the committee en bloc. So if I can just ask for a show of support. I can't see everyone, but I'm going to take that we've got support. Nobody seems to be shaking their heads. So the committee for 2021 to 22 is duly elected. Thank you all very much. So then finally, what can you expect from CARSH in the forthcoming year? So we've been working on our vision statement, and this now is available on the website, but we want to deliver this with a full programme of actions, and we'll be asking for your thoughts and views on what these should be. Our priorities, though, remain the same as for last year. We want to support you in your digital engagement, and we're keen to create more video content to hear your stories and how you deliver impact within your community. We want to ensure that CARSH is truly representative of all the groups that we serve, and we have a full range of actions to help improve our equality, diversity and inclusion. And we intend to learn more about the challenges of climate change and what we can do both as an organisation and to support you within your groups towards carbon zero. And then finally, to build on the transformative nature of community archives and heritage to increase all of our well-being and we're going to be hearing more on this evening for the winner, from the winner of our Wellbeing event award. So I think now I hand over to Nick as treasurer, just to talk through our financial position.
Thanks, Jane. Before I do, though, can I just add a note of thanks for all of your hard work. It's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege to serve alongside you as treasurer to your chair. And you've really driven the organisation on so much over the last few years, particularly in the light of the fact we've been dealing with a pandemic for the last 18 months. And that takes real skill and leadership. And I think not only have we thrived, but we've really got an exciting agenda for future years. So I just wanted to add that note of thanks before turning to the money. Let me just share my screen. Oh, it's difficult. I can't find my slides now. Al, I don't suppose you've got that set I pinged through.
I think I do.
Okay.
Would you like me to?
Would you mind? Yes,
Yeah.
if that's okay. There we go. My job as treasurer is usually to say no to anyone who wants to spend money. But because of the pandemic, this has been an extraordinary year where I've been urging anyone to spend anything they can think. But it has proved harder than normal to spend up our budget. The first thing we had to do was to accept the fact that we couldn't run a face-to-face conference, so that wiped out a large amount of our budget line, which moved to development projects. But obviously, as filming restrictions and other things hit, we weren't able to spend that up as well. So rather unusually, we had a large underspend on our budgets for the 2021 financial year. But if we move on to the next slide, Al, what we've used the time to do is to think about how we're going to spend the money this year and be a little bit more prescriptive about how we categorize the activities and assign budgets to them. So as you've seen previously, there have been quite large headings. This actually has taken some time to get right. And this is an approach we're taking in future years as well. So it's just a glimpse of the way we're spending our money this year. We've got slightly more than last. We rolled a little bit forward, but we wanted to spend some money on the film that you've just seen. And as Jane's mentioned, really focusing some of these big challenges that we're facing, wellbeing and other such projects. So we're confident that we'll be spending far more of our budget this year than we managed last year. But just to reassure everybody, our finances are in a healthy position and we are looking to find ways of adding increasing value to the CARJ community. So that's the budget update.
There we go. I think it's on to me now, isn't it? I get the well, not that, you know, AGMs and treasurer reports aren't exciting. I'm quite pleased you didn't get a round of applause this year, Nick. You've had a round of applause in previous years for the budget report, and I never got it when I was treasurer, so I'm slightly bitter.
Sorry about that. You know,
yeah.
but I tried to make it a bit exciting.
Yeah.
But,
no, people are
maybe if we'd spent
now.
more money, it might have been. Yeah.
See, people are clapping now. Look, virtually, I've created an audience for you. So yeah, I get this is now where we move into the kind of you know, Hollywood style awards events, which we're trying to recreate as well as we can virtually. So you get that lovely moment when the winners are announced and people can look at other people who didn't win and watch them sort of grimace and try and look really excited for them and things like that. So we'll do our best to create some suspense and excitement. So let me just share some more slides with you. Hopefully you can see that. Can everybody see that? Yeah, brilliant. And I've hopefully done it quickly enough that people haven't seen from the slideshow different names. So we actually, our awards have kind of changed and grown. I think somebody's not quite on mute. I wonder if I could ask people to mute themselves if they're not currently me. That sounds awful, doesn't it? So we've kind of, the awards have kind of evolved over the years. We've had different categories at different times that we felt were most appropriate. The last couple of years, we've kind of brought that down. We've always had a community engagement award. We've always had a gathering and preserving heritage award, because that seems to be really at the key of what we do with community archives. We've had different things. We've had specific awards for websites. We've had different sort of categories. In the last couple of years, we've settled on those two. And also we've brought in networks. Last year, networks seemed really important, but we didn't have much uptake with networks this year. So we'll revisit that and see how important that is in light of the different pilots that we're running. But we've also brought in a Wellbeing award, a contribution to Wellbeing award, because we're feeling very much that wellbeing is kind of at the crux of what we do with community archives. National Lottery Heritage Fund are moving towards it being a criteria. So it just feels something that's kind of very important and something we should be thinking about. But actually, lots of us have just got a general sense that what we do creates well-being. And it's quite difficult to kind of categorize and talk about what we do. But I'll leave that to our worthy winners. No pressure to somebody in the room. So I guess we need a little bit of a drum roll. So I'll begin with that particular award. So the contribution to Wellbeing award, so it's the second time we've actually awarded this, and the group that have actually won, we've got some judges' comment there when we all met to discuss who'd applied and what criteria we were marking under. We were really impressed with the way that this project connected what we called the simple act of truly being human and listening to someone's story with the formation of an archive. You know, something we should all be doing, but it's how do we know we're doing that? And we felt that participants were really made to feel heard and valued, while their narratives can connect and reconnect them with families and friends. So drum roll, drum roll, drum roll. And the winner of the Contribution to Wellbeing Award for this year is Age Cymru Dyfed for their West Wales Veterans Archive. So I'll put Hugh Morgan on the spot just ever so briefly, if you'd just like to say a word or two, Hugh.
No, thank you very much indeed, Alan, and to everybody else. I mean, it's wonderful to receive peer recognition for the effort that everybody who's been working on the West Wales Veterans Archive has put in over the past couple of years, and particularly over the past very difficult sort of 18 months. I'd just like to express our appreciation to People's Collection Wales in the National Library of Wales, the Armed Forces Covenant Fund Trust, the Armed Forces Covenant in Wales, and indeed all my colleagues, both staff and volunteers within Age Cymru Dyfed. And in particular, I'd like to single out somebody who's joined us from Canada for this evening, Chiara Falone, who was the person who actually suggested we became members of CARJ and put in an application to you for an award. So we're tremendously sort of gratified to have received this recognition. So thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you. And you'll be hearing a bit more from Hugh in a minute. Oh, I'm playing a bit. Okay, so on to the next award. So this one is Best Community Engagement. And again, just a little bit of reflection from judges when we were sort of looking at all the applications. So what we noted with these very worthy winners was a wide range of activities that the group employs to reach as wide an audience as possible. You could really tell that it wasn't just like, oh, you know, the usual suspects or the, you know, the people who normally attend. They're really thinking about how what they were doing could reach out to different groups and different people. And in this way, we felt that the work of this archive was made relevant for a real range of people who they engage with. And we were also very impressed in how well the group had continued to maintain these links through lockdown. You know, we've all struggled a little bit and all tried not to just go to Zoom and things, even though it is incredibly helpful. This group had really thought about different things they could do, and I'm sure they'll talk about that when they give their little presentation a little later. But drum roll again, and the winners for the award this year are the Clements Hall Local History Group. So big round of applause for them. And Sue, I wonder if you'd just like to say a few words, if you unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you very much, Alan. I hope you can all hear me. I was hoping that we'd have our chair, Anne Houston, saying these few words, but I forgot that she won't actually be joining us till about 6 o'clock, so you've got me instead. Just to say that we're absolutely thrilled to get to receive this award. We actually received one 3 years ago for our digital work, so it's quite remarkable that we've been able to come back and have another bash. This time, well, about 18 months ago, when we all went into lockdown, we thought, like a lot of other local history groups, that we just wouldn't be able to continue. Our community hall closed and it's still not operating normally, and we don't really see when it will very easily. But we put our heads together and worked out different ways in which we can carry on, and you'll find out about those a bit later on. But overall, we thought it was really important. We recognised that as our audience quite often were older people, and some of those older people were getting really quite low because they weren't able to talk to people and meet as normal. So we hope that some of the things that we did helped with that. So I'd just like to say on behalf of Anne and the rest of the group to thank all the people that we've worked with, the organisations. You'll find out a bit about those when we talk. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sue. Very worthy winners again. And then our next award is our Gathering and Preserving Heritage Award for this year. And again, awful lot to sort of look at and talk about, but we were particularly impressed with this project around the real scale of work and effort that had taken place around a cemetery restoration, which again you'll hear more about and might be a clue for some people. And alongside this was a real range of activities and platforms that were designed to ensure that stories were maintained, which, you know, is so important in the work that we do. The whole point of community archives is to hear different voices and hold them and capture them, create a place for them in sort of time and space almost. It was really clear to us that audiences had been given a real wide range of ways in which they could engage with this heritage. So we just felt that this group had to be the winners for this year. So the winners of the Gathering and Preserving Heritage Award for 2021 are Leavesden Hospital History Association. And Martin, big round of applause. And Martin, if I could just ask you to say a word or two.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, this is really incredible to be recognized by a group such as the Community Archives and Heritage Group and all its members and everything. We've been working on this. I've been working on this for over 13 years now, and in partnership with Three Rivers District Council's Leisure Department. I think we really have been able to gather and preserve a great deal of information and history and heritage of several local features. One of the biggest important things that I found out from all this was the history and heritage of all the people that worked at Leavesden Asylum, Leavesden Hospital, St. Pancras Orphanage, everything that we have been trying to preserve over the years. All those memories and all those stories of all the people, places, and things that made up this cultural heritage were really at risk of being lost. And again, in partnership with Three Rivers District Council, we have been able to make sure that these memories and these stories have been preserved and presented in a variety of different ways, so everybody can access them. A lot of people that worked at the hospital, a lot of people that had any association with the hospital over time had gotten to a point where they didn't talk about it. They didn't talk about their parents working at that place, that hospital. And it was really sad to see people not being able to talk about their families and their association with the hospital. So over the last 4 or 5 years, we really have been able to give people a sounding board, and people have become much, much more comfortable about talking about their time at the hospitals and their association with it, and opening up dialogue about the whole mental health learning disabilities thing, which the hospital was known for even back when it started in the 1870s. So it's really great that we've had an opportunity to do this, and you know, thank you very much for recognizing the work of everybody that's put time into it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Martin. So yes, and as I say, we didn't have a winner in terms of networks this year. Didn't seem to get the response with that. So obviously that's something that we're going to have to revisit for next year. Do we run networks again? Are networks quite not as important? Is there something else we should be considering in terms of the awards? And we'd be really interested in everybody's kind of feedback about what's, you know, what we should be looking at. It's very difficult as the Community Archives and Heritage Group to kind of consider what we're judging community archives on, because the whole idea of community archives is they're incredibly diverse, they're incredibly specific for the audience and the community that they're working with. So what criteria do we use? What do we value? What do we not? And that might be very different for different groups. So be really interested to have that dialogue with all of you over the next sort of few weeks and months, and when we're looking at next year. But then the last thing to do, and this is somewhat traumatic because it feels a little bit like you're choosing between your children. And having spoken to all three of you lots over the last year, it's very difficult because you're all fantastic and very, very worthy winners. But we did have to pick an overall winner for the year. And basically it came down to points scored by all the judges, and you know, any one of you really, really worthy winners, but we had to pick one. And so the overarching winner for this year, Community Archive and Heritage Group of Year, is the Leavesden Hospital History Association. So Martin's done a very good job of looking surprised there. That's great. Well done. And I don't know if I can put you on the spot, if there's any more you'd like to say in regard to that.
Gosh, I don't know. It's still, it's great. It's just such a recognition of all the time and effort that all the volunteers and all the people we've been working with over the years. It's just really fabulous to see them recognized in this way, because none of us ever got started in community heritage or you know, local history because of recognition. We do it because we're passionate about making sure that the history of our communities aren't lost. And this just is recognition that we've actually been successful. So it's really great. It's been an interesting 3 years, and we've accomplished quite a lot. So I'm very, very, thank you very much for everybody from the Leavesden Hospital History Association.
Brilliant. Lovely. Thank you very much. Well, three very well. So difficult on Zoom, but perhaps we could have a round of applause for all of our three worthy winners, be it like that or hands or silent. There's some excitement going on in some of those Zoom boxes, I can see. So that's great. Thank you. We're really excited to acknowledge all three groups, because we really, as I say, I've been having lots of conversations with all three of you over the last few weeks, and I think you're all amazing. So it's been a real privilege. So the next thing for me really is to put the three of you on the spot to give us a short presentation about each of your projects, and we're actually doing it in the order that we've announced things there. So Hugh's going up first. Thank you very much, Hugh, and then we'll move to Sue, and hopefully Anne will be with us to join her then, and then Martin at the end. So Hugh, are you ready to? Oh, great, good.
Oh, yeah, no, thank you very much, Alan. And the first thing to say to the Leavesden group there, it resonated very, very much with me. I actually started off as a learning disabilities nurse in a long stay hospital myself, and that was well over 40 years ago now. So
those are the people we were really trying to get a hold of, Hugh, is we wanted those stories. We worked hard at finding people like you, so it's great.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful here that you're capturing those stories over there. It's absolutely brilliant. I'm going to look forward to looking at that. Well, I mean, it really is a massive pleasure for us here within West Wales to be able to provide you all with a snapshot of the work that Age Cymru does in supporting older veterans and their families across the region. But and to be able to highlight, if you like, the part that the West Wales Veterans Archive plays within this. I'm going to start off with a bit of context and background as to how the archive came about and how it operates, before playing some audio clips of veterans themselves telling their own stories. and then finishing off with a very short video of a World War II veterans celebration we put on in Aberporth in June this year. I think you'll quickly identify the powerful combination of archive development as a means of supporting individual well-being. And this is in addition to providing genuine legacy, intergenerational impact, and informing future generations for decades to come. Now, the West Wales region covers the counties of Ceredigion, Pembrokeshire and Carmarthenshire, gross population of around 385,000. And Age Cymru Dyfed, which is the regional older persons charity working across those three counties, provides support to well over 10,000 older people each year. In the past 2.5 years, the charity has been running tailored programs of interlinking support to older veterans and their families, which sustains and enhances veterans' well-being. For example, identifying and helping them to access welfare benefits, advocating on their behalf with the DWP, HMRC, with local councils, and so on, helping them to access military pensions, identifying housing and resolving issues, providing befriending support, support with dementia, information and advice, and so on. And in a sense, those are the tools which enable us to meet our main objectives to prevent financial poverty, to reduce social isolation, to improve physical and emotional well-being, and generally empowering veterans to retain their independence for as long as possible. As a matter of practice within the charity, we ask a simple routine question of anybody contacting us: have you, by any chance, served in the armed forces? And it's surprising how many people respond positively to that. Oh yeah, I did. Well, my mother, my father, my grandmother, my grandfather, served in the armed forces. And there are immediate advantages by asking this armed forces question. We're able to immediately identify veterans and their families who need support and can tailor that support accordingly. But we also quickly find that by listening to their stories of their lives and service in the armed forces, it's a really good, a really gentle way of building a constructive partnership with them, which leads to the support for their well-being. And as a psychological model itself, it's pretty interesting. And we've got an emerging relationship with the Centre for Innovative Ageing and Swansea University to explore this model further. So in a sense, this is the background, the context for setting up the West Wales Veterans Archive. The archive came into being just as COVID was coming into force and presented challenges which you'll all recognise in how we collected veteran stories, indeed how we could continue to support older people when visits to their homes, to care homes and so on was ruled out by the COVID lockdown. So we had to be really creative in the way that we did so: phone, email, WhatsApp, Messenger, Facebook, and even snail mail, and Royal Mail, and so on. Now, the stories that we hear from veterans and their relatives can range from the unexceptional to the quite simply astounding. And almost all have been hidden from public gaze, even within their own families. All are understated in the way that they tell their stories. So the archive itself is a digital archive located on People's Collection Wales in the National Library of Wales. It currently contains almost 400 individual items with a backlog of veterans' contributions waiting to be loaded up. We have audio recordings, written material, photographs, documents, diaries, video, and so on. I wish to say that the National Library of Wales, People's Collection in the National Library of Wales, and indeed the Armed Forces Covenant Fund Trust and the Armed Forces Covenant in Wales have been absolutely fantastic in their support of the archive and the wellbeing activities which arise from it. As for staffing, I personally coordinate the archive, and with my colleagues in the charity coordinate the routes for the support of veterans. And we've been incredibly fortunate to have a small band of volunteers who to both help collect the stories, but also to often maintain the ongoing support and contact with veterans after their stories have been told. In the process of developing the archive, we've witnessed the delight within the families of learning for the first time about the exploits of their mothers, their fathers, grandparents, and so on. We have heard in one case of 3 generations of the same family, each telling their own story for the archive. Veterans who guarded Rudolf Hess and Spandau Prison, several who did national service in Germany during the Cold War, Malaya, served on nuclear submarines and on bases in India, Japan, Korea, Borneo, Belize, Aden, and even during the atom bomb testing on Christmas Island. But I make no apology tonight of just having a particular focus on our World War II veterans, those who served and those who spent their childhood during the war. To have served in the military during the war, not just military, civil defense force, in the land army, in musicians and so on, they would have at least today to be 95, 96 years of age. Yet we currently have probably about 24 World War II veterans accounts, either on the archive or being loaded up to the archive fairly shortly. And of course, these people are our last voices from that major world conflict. So it's incredibly important to try and capture them. So rather than listen to me anymore, you can listen to the veterans themselves telling their stories, and also watch a little clip from our World War II veterans celebration. Alan's the skilled guy here. He knows what he's doing, so I'm very much in his hands now.
He's got no idea what he's doing, but he's doing his best. It's
okay, all right. My apologies for the poor quality of the sound editing. I'm personally very much in the infancy of learning the craft of digital sound editing. I suppose one thing for sure is I've never made it as a sound engineer in Abbey Road Studios. So you're going to listen to 2 audio clips and 1 short video. Now, the first audio clip is a very recent interview I did in September with Pauline Penrose in the week leading up to her 100th birthday. Pauline moved from the south of England to a home near Cardigan well over 40 years ago. And in this clip, she recounts 2 episodes. The first of a landmine dropping by her parents' house during the London Blitz. And the second, a brief but very poignant recollection of her time as an aircraft plotter on a frontline fighter station in Essex. Okay, thank you, Alan.
Had to sell the house and we moved to Southgate, North London. And we lived there and when the war came. We had a landmine that landed at the side of us. We were a little joining road with 2 houses either side of the road. It was a link road, but 2 long roads. And then one day this landmine, I was actually on leave. When I used to go home, the first thing I did was have a hot bath, because it were very difficult circumstances there. That was when I would be at Hornchurch, I think. You had to walk to the bathhouse, quite a walk from where we were billeted, and you had to take your towel and that. And of course there were never any plugs there, but we found that if we wrapped a handkerchief round a penny, that worked as a plug, so you could have a bath. And of course nobody ever cleaned them. So of course, as soon as I got home, I have a hot bath at home. And while I was in the bath, this landmine landed on the road that ran to the side, and a terrible crash, of course. And it blew in our front door. It smashed the side window. We had a side window on the stairs. And my mother called out, and of course, no, we couldn't put the lights on because all the blackout had come down. And she said, be careful you come down, there's broken glass on the stairs. So of course I wrapped the towel around me, and I managed to get down without doing much of an injury of anything. And of course it wasn't till daylight when we could, well, we looked out at because the front door was blown off. I don't know if it was blown off or blown in. I think it was just blown in. And when we looked out, there were the row of houses at the side there, and it was like a gap in a tooth. 2 of them had gone down. One of them, because the men were at war, it was just the wife, and I think it was just one child, and they'd taken cover under a thick oak table, and they survived. The whole house had collapsed on them, but they survived. But the couple on the next house, oh, I don't know how many there were there, they didn't. So yes, that was a bit of a shock. Our mess right on the edge of the airfield, and we could see the planes going off, and very often we'd stay there. This was when I was a plotter. We'd stay there and try and count them as they came back, and you know, so often they didn't all come back. It was very upsetting. And of course you got to know them.
Yes.
Some of the pilots. And
Okay, right. So thanks very much for that. So that was Pauline talking just 4 weeks ago now. The next clip is of John Martin, again a Londoner, who then came to live in Wales. And John is talking here about the exact moment and immediate aftermath of an attack by a German night fighter on the Lancaster, in which John was a member of aircrew. This took place on the 30th of January 1944, but John vividly recounts his experience, and John is also 100 years old. Okay, thanks, Alan.
And what was the position of the aircraft at that point? Was it sort of going down?
Yes, it was diving in a terrific dive, and I actually got in. The pilot, of course, quite correct. He'd left his seat, and he was in this queue trying to get out through the front hatch.
Mm-hmm.
But I climbed into his seat and tried to pull the aircraft out of the dive. But I knew immediately that was no good, because the stick was just flopping about, and obviously lost all control from the stick, and nothing I could possibly do. And I tried to get out through the dinghy escape hatch. I couldn't get that undone, so I thought, well, this is my lot, this is the end of my life. And I suddenly remembered that before bailing out, I should have, you heard me talk about these 2 buttons where you blow up the identification thing or so set.
Yes.
I remembered I should have triggered that off before I started to bail out. So I went back to my position, sat down, pressed these 2 buttons, and the next thing I knew was a terrific explosion. And I was, well, I don't know what happened really, I was knocked unconscious. And I can remember becoming conscious and seeing a huge piece of the aircraft flying by me very closely. And then the parachute opening, which sort of jerked me back into a bit of consciousness. But how it happened, I think what happened, that's more I can't remember pulling the ripcord at all. And I think what probably happened, that the ripcord got tangled up with the wreckage as the aircraft was blown apart, and the ripcord got pulled by that. So I was extremely lucky. And I knew I wasn't very far off the ground. It was like when we were first attacked, we'd be flying something like 30,000 feet or 29, perhaps something like that. And I knew the time I regained consciousness, and the parachute out in this jolt. I was probably no more than 1,000 feet above the ground.
Gosh, you were very low.
Well, I must have fallen a terrific way.
Yes.
And but I was still having half conscious when I was coming down. I remember hitting the ground much harder than I thought I should have been doing. And then, no, on the way down, that's it. I realised that the parachute harness had been ripped off from one side of my body. The straps had been ripped right off. And I had enough sense, I was conscious enough then to realise that if I leant over to that side, I would fall out completely and be dangling by my feet from the parachute. But I had enough sense and enough consciousness to realise what I've got to do. I just clung on to the straps as hard as I could. The straps going up to the parachute, and just held on like that.
Okay. Thank you, Alan. Right, I mean, the first thing to say is you probably realise that that interview was done by phone. It was done in, I think it was January and February this year, but that was our only way of reaching out to some of these older veterans who were not digitally connected. And it was during that phone call that John said to me that he and his wife Adelaide really hadn't seen anybody over the previous year. And I said, look, John, once we get out of this, why don't we just go and have an afternoon tea in Aberporth? There is actually an RAF station in Aberporth there, but let's go and have an afternoon tea there, and we'll see if we get one or two other veterans together. Now, you know, this is about the well-being aspect of this. So using that idea, I kept John informed all the way through. We arranged a World War II celebration event, which was held on the 77th anniversary of D-Day on 6th of June this year, just as the reduction of lockdown restrictions were coming in. You can imagine the risk assessments that I had to go through in terms of making this happen. It was absolutely, totally horrendous, but I had to do it all via the local council there. It turned out that we had an absolutely fantastic day. We had 11 veterans of World War II coming to the event, including John, who you've just spoken to. We didn't know about Pauline at that time there, but people travelled from all over the place to come within West Wales. So the last thing I'm going to finish with now is just a very short video of the event in June at the Pentrault Hotel in Aberporth. And I hope you enjoy it. I do appreciate very, very much being able to talk about our work to you this evening, and my heartiest congratulations go to the other two award winners. So, Alan, if you could just finish with this clip, please. Thank you very much indeed.
and thank you all very much for coming. I don't want to keep you from your delicious tea, because this is the whole point of today, that you come and enjoy speaking to each other and to us about your remarkable experiences. Yours has been called the greatest generation, and that's quite right. You are a very resilient generation. You've come through so much, and you have so much to teach us who come after you.
That's wonderful, Hugh. Thank you so much. That's really great. I'm just making sure I've stopped the video playing. We do have a couple of minutes for questions. I know Hugh's got an important appointment to get to, but I'm just looking in the chat if there's any questions. Just seems like just lots of people saying how wonderful and inspiring your work is, Hugh, which is lovely. Does anybody have a question or two for Hugh? Or general accolades? Feel free. Very quiet lot. Feel free to pop something in the chat. Oh, Martin, yeah.
Hugh, that was absolutely brilliant. Really emotional to see all that history and everything recorded in that. My mom and dad both grew up in London. They went through the war. I listened to the stories my mom tells, my Uncle Bobby tells about living through all of that. So I have a kind of a special little connection to it. Mom was evacuated and lived through all that, the bombings and stuff. My question is how did you go about getting the oral histories? Was that your main goal? Is that something that came out of something else? Or why are getting those recordings so important to the overall project?
Okay. I mean, it was actually, we evolved into the audio recordings. It became an increasingly important way for us to collect and to listen, to be able to listen to veteran stories. Remember when I said a little earlier, this project really came into being at the beginning of COVID. We were really, really limited in the opportunities to get out and see people, which would have been the normal route of sort of doing things, you know, going to their homes and interviewing and sitting there with pen and paper and, you know, and having a bit of a recording going on and so on. But you know, increasingly we recognize that audio, it is so important. It brings an absolute immediacy to anybody listening to a Pauline or a John or any of the others who've been telling their stories there. I mean, I'd like to think that we might move into sort of video a bit more as we come out of lockdown. One of the things that has emerged from this, and it emerged particularly from the event in Aberporth, is that ITV Wales came and filmed it and had it on their, you know, on the ITV Wales news items that evening and the following day. Well, as a result of that, ITV Wales are now making a documentary on some of our veterans, which will be shown next year. It'll be a 1-hour documentary. But, you know, I just, you know, have to stress that the importance of this is these are just about the last opportunities we're ever going to get to capture the voices and the contributions of those people who were unquestionably, in my view, our greatest generation. And you know, that's why it's been such a special project in terms of our World War II veterans. But of course, then we have veterans who served, you know, in later conflicts and so on. And I have to be perfectly honest, the Iraq, the Afghanistan, and those sorts of things, people who served in those theatres of operation, you know, collecting their stories may well become very, very important in the future. Maybe they'll be very important now. I have to say, for me personally, I don't understand it. And I don't, in a sense, I don't feel skilled enough in terms of collecting their stories at this point. But the focus of our charity is very much upon the older population. So that is why we have collected stories from people who did national service, who served post-war, in the immediate post-World War II years, and obviously during World War II.
Great, thank you. And anybody else with any questions? Not sure if I can see everybody's hands if they're up. Is that Roger? If you've got a hand up there, yeah.
I have. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Hugh. So I'm a young veteran, and I'm also proud to say that I'm a new volunteer to assist Hugh in this wonderful project. I was a little bit late joining the video link this evening, for which I apologise. But I just want to say, as a veteran, I'm very, very proud and honoured to be involved in the project. And Hugh, once all the necessary bits and pieces are sorted, I'm really looking forward to getting started. And I congratulate you and the team on what you've done so far. And I'm very honoured to be allowed to be part of your team. Thank you very much.
We're privileged to have you on board, Roger, I can assure you. Roger was the Royal Marine Commando, by the way.
Nick's put something in the chat which actually is something I was thinking about, and Martin's supported him. He's put, there's something powerful and moving about hearing these testimonies in their own words rather than transcripts. And you know, as an oral history historian of old, that's always the, you know, if people can tell their own stories, why would we try and get in the way of that, you know? And that's just come through wonderfully, I think, with your presentation. And some of the conversations we've had over the last few days, it's incredibly powerful what you're doing, I think.
Thank you. Can I ask a quick question, please?
Yes, of course.
Good evening, Nick. Good evening, everybody. I want to say a big thank you as well. I think Roger beat me to the gun there. I'm an ex-veteran as well, and to hear those stories of those who came before us kind of validates people like myself of my generation joining. I'm a younger veteran than Roger, I think. Served in the Royal Air Force, but thank you. I felt every piece of emotion as a soldier in the 80s, and it's a fantastic testimony and tribute to the armed services. Thank you.
No, thank you very much indeed, and we must have some contact after this between us. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Folks and jokes. Thank you, Milton. That's great. And anybody else? Any other thoughts or questions? No. I think you've done well there, Hugh. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
No, that's been lovely. No, thank you. Really enjoyed it. So we're a wee bit ahead of schedule, but we have booked in a little 10-minute break now, just because everyone's been on Zoom for a little while. So we're just coming up for 10 past. So if I pause our recording, could we reconvene at 20 past 6? Would that be okay for everyone? General thumbs up, nobody shouting? Nope, brilliant. So I'll do my little pausing. There we go. I'm very proud of myself for actually pausing the break, because normally I leave that to poor Joe to edit out 10 minutes in the middle. So that might make his life a little bit easier. So we're back again, and I can see Sue. and I can see Anne, so they're the main people that I need at this point, so that's a very good sign. So I'm going to hand over to Sue and Anne, who are going to tell us about their wonderful work with the Clements Hall Local History Group, if you're both ready, ladies.
Before we start, am I okay to share my screen now?
You're all set up.
Yeah.
I hope you'll bear with us. We've not ever done this before, but here we go. So I'm Anne Hooson, is my name, and I'm chair for the moment of Clements Hall Local History Group in York. I'm going to be sharing the presentation with my colleague Susan, and I'm going to be starting off by telling you a little bit about who we are and what we do. We're based at a rather beautiful community hall in the southwest part of York, quite close to the city centre. We formed our group in 2013 there, so we're a relatively new group as compared with some of the other groups here tonight, I would imagine. We combine old and new techniques, a lot of with regard to oral history and investigating archives, but we also have been pushing hard to involve new techniques and devices to engage with local history, such as smartphone apps, and those we hope have enabled us to share stories and explore how events and forces have shaped our local community, which is the area slightly to the southwest of the city centre, as I said, bounded by our river, the River Ouse, the famous River Ouse on one side, part of the racecourse and common land pertaining to the racecourse on the other side, and on, it's a sort of triangle, so on the other side, newly, the hill that the Duke of York went up and down, also known as Nicklegate, so fairly rich area in history and stories, which are all about stories. Our management group meets regularly to plan a programme of history talks and to stimulate, organise and promote our local history activity in the community. All the history group members are volunteers, nobody's paid, and I know that lots of us here put in a lot of time towards the group and a lot of unbounded enthusiasm. As for our money, our income stream is raised from membership, subscriptions, talk fees and book sales. We normally have 50 to 60 members, but our community engagement activity during 2020 and 2021 led us to just about doubling that. In fact, I think more than doubling that, to over 100 members. And that was largely as a result of the way we sought to engage with people more remotely, and slightly because of the COVID epidemic. Our activity attracts older people especially, which was also something that we needed to look at. And those older people have many experiences and interests and much to offer us. Here we've got a sort of scrapbook of what our area is like, and it's mostly densely urban population, around 12,000 people in the area, many of whom live in closely packed streets, Victorian terraces and that sort of thing. There's also a 1930s housing estate and some 1960s social housing and some post-2000 development, a lot of which is holiday lets. Newly included this year, as I've mentioned, was a quite historic area of York called Bishop Hill, very, very deeply rich in history. We have a thriving local street, full of independent local traders, beautiful historic buildings, 2 primary schools with whom we work, which you'll hear about later, a very attractive riverside area, a beautiful park given to the city by Joseph Rowntree, in memory of the people who lost their lives in World War I, who worked for Joseph Rowntree, the chocolate people. And the area has lots of varied events, including street parties and various celebrations. So it's a very lively, thriving area. And we engage in a lot of research in our area. A little bit about our research projects. More or less the first big one that we ever undertook was in 2016, and we applied for a Heritage Lottery grant to enable us to explore the impact and legacy of the First World War on our neighbourhood. And this was quite a lot of hard work, but very, very useful and very, it enticed a lot of people, I believe, into the history group. We didn't just look at the war dead, we looked at themes that are perhaps not explored by other local history groups, such as women in wartime, and the surprisingly varied and different reasons that people became conscientious objectors. We also looked at a devastating Zeppelin raid that happened in our area in 2016. We are currently exploring the history of our local shopping, and Susan will talk about this later, and we've done an awful lot of work on this. Some of our shops are nearly 200 years old in this area, and we're supported in a lot of this by our local traders. We also have an area near to the river, which used to be a thriving industrial area in Victorian times and before that, largely due to its proximity to the river. We've done an awful lot of work on that and are hoping eventually to bring a book out about that. That is absolutely fascinating because it explores the things that you can't actually see. And the other thing which is ongoing with us as well is making ends meet on Nunnery Lane and revealing local poverty in the Victorian period. I'll be talking about this later, but we've had access to some fantastic archives which help us to explore the stories behind poverty in our area, going back as far as about 1830 or thereabouts. We are very aware that it is helpful to have our website as bright and lively and interesting and changing as possible and up to date as possible. And this is one of the main features of our history group. We feel it reaches into the community quite deeply, and not just to the people who actually live here, but also to the people who have lived here, who have memories of this place and have moved to different parts of the country and indeed to different parts of the world. And they all enable us to complete the loop, to share stories about what have happened in our area. We both dispense information about these stories and get information back from the people who read them. So it's a really good loop. There are a load of stories on there on the screen. I'll not go into the naughty nuns of Clementhorpe. I'll leave that as a sort of teaser for everybody in case they want to visit our website. Some of the things we've explored are the story of a local street which suffered a bombing in 1942 and an aircraft crash in 1949. So doubly tragic events, and it has been named the most unfortunate street in York. We also have a story about a local composer who sadly died of TB in his 20s, who probably would have gone on, had he lived, to be a very notable musician of the day. He was mostly a pianist, but a very talented man called William Baines. And then Charles Dickens' brother shared an office on Micklegate, that is the one that the Grand Old Duke of York walked up and down. He shared an office with a character called Richard Chicken, and it is thought that Richard Chicken was the inspiration to Dickens the novelist for Mr. Micawber. So there you have. We can't conclusively prove this, but this Richard Chicken was certainly a character. A little bit about the pandemic, which sort of affected everybody, didn't it? It certainly affected the way that we decided to run the history group. Historically, we'd had meetings at the Clements Hall in person and talks where people could socialise, etc. This all had to stop, obviously, during the pandemic, and we worked hard to keep our activities going. This is going to continue to be difficult. We don't know when we're ever going to have real meetings again. We'll probably go forward using a hybrid model, and it's certainly going to be a challenge. We've moved to online banking and a PayPal business account linked to our business, linked to our website. And this is certainly going to be a help to us in making a smooth run in getting our income through, which we used to take in person at the hall. It's certainly a more efficient way of doing things. So for us, the pandemic has been, obviously it's been a curse. It's been a curse for everybody, but in some respects it's been a bit of a blessing because it's enabled us to think carefully and strategically about how we reach into the community. We've had to do our talks by Zoom. We did 4 in 2020 and 6 in 2021. And this was all part of a big learning curve. We've persuaded speakers new to technology to offer Zoom talks and helped them and coached them and offered rehearsals for their talks. We've also asked participants for feedback about the talks. One of the major things, recognising that the membership was quite old and probably not as tech savvy as we would have thought, we sent out a questionnaire to our members asking how they felt about these Zoom talks. And as a result of that, I think we were probably quite surprised to learn how tech savvy some of those people were, but it enabled us to help and support people who were perhaps unfamiliar with the ins and outs of Zoom, as of course we all were at the beginning. And I have to thank Peter Monither for helping us do that and setting up tutorials for people. That has been very successful. And I think as part of engaging with the community, it's also helped some people who were very reluctant to use these remote resources to be more confident with them and hence meet each other and socialize, albeit on Zoom. I'm going to hand over now to Susan to take over from me. So it's good night from me for a short period. I'll be back later. So over to Susan.
Thanks very much, Anne. Anne mentioned the fact that our target age group are not necessarily very savvy about computers. What we obviously, in the main, we would communicate with our members using email, but we recognise that for some people, email is a real problem. So we do try and hand deliver communications if necessary. But one thing that we felt was really important for those who really don't like being online or don't know how or can't use it is keeping up our relationship with the local press. And in fact, these are just some examples of features that we've had in the press over the last 18 months. The press are very keen on photographic material. We can provide them with lots of interesting old photographs that attract their readers. So they're very, very helpful. So we quite often will get a double page spread about our project, which often attracts people coming forward with memories or photographs. So we feel that's a really good relationship and very helpful to us. Next, we've also moved into smartphone history walks. In the past, we've offered guided walks as well as talks, but obviously over the last 18 months, we haven't been able to do that. And one of our colleagues mentioned a platform called Easy, and it's very interesting because it enables us to create some what we call lockdown walks. It means that an individual or a couple or a family can do these. And basically, it's a smartphone app, which if somebody's downloaded it, tell it where you are, you can tell it your location, and it will display the walks around you, of which there are quite a few around here now, because we've created about 5, I think. It will tell you where to go to the starting place. There's a little example here of the map. You'll go to point 1 and it will immediately, when you're there, play you an introductory commentary, and then it will tell you which way to go, and you walk round the route, and when you actually arrive at a spot, it will automatically start playing again. So it works really well, and it also includes images, and the commentary is there written out as well as on your phone. So so far we've had about something like 2,000 content views on that, and 1,200 content plays, because it is possible actually to play these just at home. But obviously, and that's what some people have done, but quite a lot of people have played them en route. For people who don't really want to be online, it is possible to actually, we've made it so that they can print those out and follow them round, brandishing a piece of paper. We wanted, it was an interesting exercise. We wanted them to be able to be used by all sorts of people. And when we were plotting them out, we soon found that there's all sorts of ways in which the pavement is obstructed, and that we wanted them to be used, for instance, by people in wheelchairs. And it's amazing what you discover when you look at it. But we did enlist the help of our local councillors, and also worked with our local disability rights forum to actually do a test walk. And we've managed to solve some problems. For example, one pavement had a rather large salt bin on it, which meant a wheelchair couldn't get past. And thanks to the councillors, we managed to get that moved quite quickly. But there's other things which stop people walking around, such as pavement parking. When you've got a car parked on the pavement plus recycling bins, they become inaccessible, and also parking on dropped curbs. So there's still a long way to go on that. But it does mean that the Disability Rights Forum are actually publicising our talks via their social media. Another area of work that we've been very keen on over the last 3 years is our book project. We've done a lot of research into our local shops because we have a large amount of independent traders, and some of those buildings have been in use as shops for getting on for 200 years, many for 100 years. And so we've done a lot of work on this. We started in 2018 with a book. We managed to get help from various charitable bodies to produce that. And that means the income from that book then funded the next one, which we published in 2019, and so on. It's the low priced, our books are between £5 and £8. And so far, of the series, we've sold something like 2,300. And it's a really good way to engage a wide group of people, a lot of whom are attracted by the nostalgia aspect. But obviously, we have a lot of factual information in there as well. It does mean those people who are interested will sometimes join in with our ongoing activity. One example there, I've quoted Keith as somebody who approached us because basically he was interested in family history, but that led him to more of an interest in local history, and he had some material that was useful. And because he did that, he really enjoyed being involved in the group. And it meant that his personal research was published in our book. And as he said there, it gave him a real sense of achievement, and he felt honoured to have his name included. And so that's the sort of thing can happen when people get inspired by these sort of topics. As you might guess, we're very much involved with making sure that we have a really good website. We were able to improve our website tremendously with our Heritage Lottery funding about 3 or 4 years ago, and we live in an online world, so it's really important having an attractive, dynamic site that changes new things all the time, keeping it up to date. So if you are interested, the web address is there. We link it to social media. Obviously, social media has its pros and cons, but we do find using media such as Facebook and Twitter particularly useful, not only for publicising what we do, but for networking. I find Twitter particularly useful for networking, but also for attracting memories. If you're stuck with a particular aspect and you're trying to find out who ran that shop 30 years ago, if you put it on a nostalgia group on Facebook, you probably find the answer. And in fact, we were very pleased to win awards both from the Communities Archives and Heritage Group in 2018, and also the Alan Ball Award from the British Association for Local History in 2019 for our website. So during last year, we were determined to keep going, even though we couldn't have talks, and we decided originally to keep going by continuing to publish lots of blog posts on our site. In the end, we published 26 blog posts last year, covering a wide range of stories, features, researches, quizzes. We now have something like 500 website visitors a month, and we get quite a lot of inquiries via the website. And we do encourage people to write blog posts for us, and we give them some guidelines to how to go about it. Our poverty project, which Anne will mention towards the end, also produces regular reports. And we also have a YouTube channel, which in the main is our videos relating to our World War I project. Another important thing that we did during lockdown, we've been really proud of, is we decided to use one of our pubs as a local history hub. because we were keen on researching the local shops and pubs in that area in Nunnery Lane. And the licensees were very supportive because they knew they had customers who were interested in history, and it fitted in with their other community activities, and they allowed us to put a display up there. The beauty of that particular pub is it has a very large beer garden, so during restrictions we were able to have a number of meetings and sessions suitably distanced in their beer garden, so that really worked very well. We did ask the people who are helping us with our shop's history research if they would like to continue to meet using Zoom or in the pub, and I think you can probably guess what the answer to that was. They really valued being able to meet and talk face to face. We recognised that some people were getting really quite low, and being able to meet up was really good, and it also attracted new people. And in fact, we launched our latest book there last month. I'm going to hand back to Anne now to finish.
Hello again. Right, when we're not lounging about in the pub sharing memories, etc., or anything like that, we've also been very proactive working with local schools. Now, when we had our Heritage Lottery Fund grant, we worked with primary schools then on a shops history resource pack and to some extent on the World War I project. During 2020 and 2021, we've been in discussion with two local primary schools, the two primary schools that are actually in our area, about developing resource material for their curriculum, reflecting our local history studies. And these are based on archival evidence and themes. And the themes we're working on with the Key Stage 2 children at the moment are migration in the 20th century, Victorians and the impact of railways on York, and poverty. It's worth asking local schools, and we found it very worthwhile, how their curriculum relates to our project work. And we found it to be extraordinarily helpful. It builds a good link with the school. As you can see from the comments that we've got there on the slide, the teaching staff are obviously very, very keen on doing this. It helps the children to get an enthusiasm for history, to flesh out things with actual stuff that is there on their doorstep, which is absolutely invaluable. And of course, it helps us reach into the community because these children have grandparents who may also live here, and they in turn will have children of their own, which we hope that somehow indirectly we will have enthused with history and a curiosity about history. If you want to sample our YouTube channel, which Susan mentioned earlier, we have a secondary history teacher trainer on that YouTube channel talking about history and the secondary curriculum, and this we found extraordinarily helpful. That teacher trainer is one of our members. Moving on to our history, our 19th century poverty research project. We've been carrying on with this using archives that are available from the local library, which is called Explore. And the library here has one of the best collections of out-relief records in Britain. It's helped us produce stories about how poverty was really like in the Victorian period. And we focused specifically on a small area in our area, a couple of streets, or more, just a few streets, I should say, rather than a couple, to do these studies. We were able to attract people new to this type of research, such as Catherine Sutherland, who I think is here now, along with some other members from our group of the poverty research group. And I wondered if Catherine would be able to say a few words about how engaging with this work has impacted upon her. Are you out there, Catherine? Are you able to say a few words? If you do, yeah, please on myself. Thank you. Hello.
Hello. Yes, I first got involved with the Poverty Project when one of the archivists from York Archives gave a talk on the Poor Law Union, and I'd been a volunteer there helping clean and catalogue these records. So I thought it might be of interest to help with the project, having seen some of the records firsthand. and it was interesting getting together with other people with the same similar interests and learning a few more research techniques, such as exploring the newspaper archive as well, which finding stories that tied in with some of the people we were researching. So it's been interesting couple of years when I was working on that project.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Catherine. And I think that's the message we get from a lot of people who've worked on our projects. It's helped to build up confidence and empower and skill them, and most importantly of all, talk about history with other people there, either through Zoom or actually face to face in the pub, and sharing expertise and tips. Anyway, I'll leave it with you there. Here are our contact details on the screen. Thank you for having us here, and it's such an honour to get the reward, get the award as well, not the reward, award. Thank you, everyone.
That's brilliant. Thank you all so much. Little round of applause there, I think. Oh, and we've got a bit of online applause going on as well. That's wonderful. Now, we do have a few minutes for questions. I see there was a question or two in there that Sue has skillfully answered whilst giving the talk at the same time, which is a level of multitasking which I've never been able to manage in my life. So that's very impressive. Someone was asking about the app, and it's Easy Travel, isn't it, Sue?
Yes, it's Easy Travel. And certainly as far as we were concerned, it didn't cost us anything apart from an inordinate amount of time creating it. I can't remember, at some stage there is a cost, and I can't remember, not for us, but I can't remember what the deal is, but it's certainly worth exploring, and you can see our walks if you go to Easy Travel and put York in as a search term.
It's brilliant, isn't it? And are there any other questions from our exalted panel? No. I've had fantastic ideas coming in from Jane there. Thank you so much, Anne and Sue, for sharing, which is true. I've had somebody ask me just, is it difficult to decide what you're going to look at and what you're going to research with York being such a sort of historic area? You know, what's your criteria for projects?
Can I answer that, for starters? It is, well, particularly since we've taken over the Bishop Hill area of York, it has been particularly difficult to choose. There's lots of stuff out there and it's difficult. It's like having a box of chocolates or something like that. But by and large, what's available in the archives and what material that is available to us tends to dictate what we go on to study, I think would be fair to say. I don't know whether Sue has anything to add to that.
The other thing I would say is we don't have an archival space, so we have to use our website really as an archive. But there's various things that have driven our researches, because everybody was being encouraged to think about World War I. That drove that huge project. The fact we've got lots of independent shops meant shops history was top of the bill. The fact that Catherine and her colleagues using the out relief records at the York Explore, that was a really good source of evidence. So that it's all sorts of different reasons why we choose things.
That's great. Anybody else? Anyone? I can't see everybody's screen, so if anyone does want to ask something, feel free to unmute and speak like normal. Yeah. No, I think they're all just suitably impressed, Sue and Anne. Thank you very much. It's a very worthy group of winners this year, isn't it? You can see why we struggled and why they're all so wonderful. There we go. Lorna Elm's very impressed. You see, we all are. That's wonderful. Well, thank you. Well, we'll have another little round of applause. I'm the only one who you can hear at the moment, I think, because my speaker's on, but lovely. Thank you both so much. Fascinating. Really, really wonderful. So that means I can hand things on to our last speaker of the night. No pressure, Martin, who's grand finale, who's going to tell us about Leavesden Hospital History Association. And I think you're happy to share your own slides, aren't you, Martin? So
yes, I'm going to try and get them up now, so hopefully it will work. see how this goes. Right, that should be the start of it. Can everybody see that? I can't hear anybody, so I'm going to assume everything is okay.
I can't see him yet, actually.
I can only see you, Martin.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
This worked perfectly before you all got here.
I
so
know.
I'm
That's, I'm trying to figure out why all of a sudden. Oh, wait a minute. I think I know. I've got to go back to this share screen. All right, Emma, I'll get it. Don't worry.
There we go. That's looking good.
Yeah, I forgot to share the screen.
Yeah, can see that.
Right? Are we ready? We ready to go, Emma?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is going to be kind of a brief one. The Leavesden Hospital History Association was founded by myself in 2011. What I wanted to do at that time was to make sure that the people, places, and events that made up the history and cultural heritage of the Leavesden Asylum hospitals were not forgotten. The hospital had been around in the area of Abbots Langley since 1868 when it was starting to be built. It was first conceived by the Metropolitan Asylums Board for the purpose of basically just providing an asylum, a safe place of refuge for all the people that were living on the streets and had medical conditions, mental health conditions at the time. So I got started in 2008 when I became the first park ranger at Three Rivers District Council. And it wasn't shortly after I started working for the council at Leavesden Country Park. People wanted to tell me all about the old asylum that used to be here, and there was an orphanage across the road, and Jack the Ripper was buried in the old East Lane Cemetery. So luckily, the latter one has proven to be a pretty much an urban legend, but it's still a legend that is told to this day. So the parts that made up the Leavesden Hospital or the surrounding areas at the time, and this goes back to 1870 when it first opened, was the Leavesden Asylum Hospital from 1870 until 1995, the St. Pancras Workhouse and School, which was just across the road, a road at that time, which was called Asylum Road, which is known as College Road now. The Canadian Hospital, which took over the old St. Pancras Workhouse back in 1939. Canadian Royal Air Force took it over as a hospital to take care of their servicemen on their way to and on their way back from World War II. It became the Khaki University, where the Canadian hospitals or the Canadian RAF soldiers were able to train. You can see the big white buildings here. The big white buildings here were actually the billets. So this was about 500 Canadian soldiers that were living here and attending school at the old St. Pancras orphanage and everything. So this is the south side. This is Asylum Road, College Road later on. And that was pretty much the area that we were trying to include in all this history and heritage and everything. So what I did is in about 2009, I realized that I had enough information, or at least a little bit of information, to start conducting what I termed the brief walk through time. So we would go on 3.5, 4-hour walks around the site, and we would cover some of the old buildings and some of the grounds of the old hospital and everything. And this started to become really, really popular. We would have anywhere from 30 to 50 people attend the walks. And that went on for some time. It was also during this time that I was able to start going out into the community. So I started getting calls and requests from a lot of the local schools and a lot of the local history groups and U3A groups and everything to talk about the Leavesden Asylum, Leavesden Hospital. And it seemed like whenever I started to talk to these people, when I would go out, people would show up and they would have artifacts. So they would be donating things that were family heirlooms to them, that were part of their family's connection to the hospital. They had relatives that worked there. They may have worked there themselves. So they were always willing to donate stuff. And this kind of became the start of collecting all the archives and everything that we have now. In 2015, or slightly before that, I guess it may have officially started, Three Rivers District Council realized that gathering and preserving all the history of three of the main employers of the area was a pretty good deal. When they started mentioning that they were doing this, people really came forward. They were really encouraging, and they really wanted to see this history and heritage preserved in the local area. So Leavesden or Three Rivers District Council Leisure Department came up with the idea for the Leavesden Country Park Heritage Project. It started in 2015, and they really did go put a lot of time and effort into consulting with local residents, local history groups, a variety of other people to just figure out how could we best display all this history and heritage and everything, which is probably the biggest part of the project. It really created a very visual way in a very variety of ways to just really show the history and heritage and everything. The three main features of the Heritage Project were called Minds, Machines, and Movies. And this relates again to the three largest employers in the area, which starting off with the Leavesden Asylum. So the old Leavesden Asylum was the Leavesden Hospital, which ran from 1868 till 1930. Then it was taken over by the London County Council. It was renamed the Leavesden Mental Hospital. And then it was taken over by the NHS when that was formed in 1948, and it became just the Leavesden Hospital. And these were three of the sculptures that were created to just visually show what connection the community had with the people and the staff and the volunteers and everybody that used to work at this hospital. So you can see some of the features we have here. This is a little artistic sculpture representing the evolution of what people used to think about mental health care. I mean, the people that first started working at the hospital were called guards. Then they were referred to as attendants, and then they became mental health nurses. The center one that we have here is the Remembrance Garden. And that basically is just remembering all the people that worked or volunteered at the hospital. This little structure here is the Remembrance Wall, and it kind of really defines what it was like to be on which side of the wall were you on. A lot of people like to think that the hospital like Leavesden and its sister hospital on the south side of London, which was St. Lawrence's Asylum in Caterham, were these places actually built with a lot of walls around them to keep the patients in or to keep the public out. So this wall is kind of representing just what kind of reflection you have and what side of the wall are you actually on. So this relates just to the Leavesden Asylum Hospital's part of the Leavesden Country Park Heritage Project. So this was the machines part of it, which was the Leavesden Aerodrome and the Rolls-Royce plant, which was in operation from 1942 until 1995. And this was established to support the war effort. So Halifax bombers and the Mosquito bombers were all manufactured here and everything. And a lot of the people that worked in the area or lived in the area, they either had a job at the hospital or they had a job at the Rolls-Royce plant. And the stories that all these people can tell about being there is really fantastic. And this is one of the things that we wanted to capture. So this was captured in three separate sculptures in the park, just about the Leavesden Aerodrome and the Rolls-Royce plant. The third one was the movies. We are lucky enough to, after the Leavesden Aerodrome closed in 1995, there was a production company that was looking to make the latest 007 film, GoldenEye, but they couldn't find any place at Shepperton Film Studios, Pinewood Studios, Elstree. Everybody was filled up. So somebody mentioned, well, there's this old airfield. There's this old aerodrome, a lot of big hangars and everything. We can use that. And they actually made GoldenEye back in 1995, which they thought that was a pretty good idea. So they formed the Leavesden Film Company, or the Leavesden Film Studios. And one of the first big users of that film studio back in the early 2000s was Warner Brothers Studios. They came here to make Harry Potter. And they thought the place was so great that in 2008, they bought the whole thing and turned it into the Warner Brothers Studios Leavesden. So these are just a couple of things. Another set of three sculptures that are in tribute or in recognition of the local film industry. which again, we've collected a lot of stuff. So over time, 13 years now, I've been collecting things and people have been donating things. And these are just a few of the things that the Leavesden Hospital History Association has in its archives. We have things like teddy bears that were made by the patients, coat hangers, stools of various sizes that were made by the patients as part of their therapy project. We have an old wall clock that goes back to 1931. We have a telephone from the mortuary, which is one of the favorite pieces of one of our volunteers. We have a couple of the big pieces. Some of the more popular pieces that we have in our archives are the Stewart's logbook, or the Stewart's report book. Now this goes back to 1895. It covers a period from 1895 to 1899. It was written in by the chief steward, Mr. Henry Chapin, and it's one of the few, if not the only, written records of what happened at the asylum during that time that survived. A lot of the records were damaged in the early 1900s. So a lot of the really old records relating to the hospital were damaged. So this is a very rare piece that we have, all handwritten, very interesting. It tells the day-to-day operations of what it took to actually run an asylum back in the Victorian times. A couple of the unique entries that are in here is it is one of the few written records we have of the cholera epidemic, which we have reason to believe caused the death of about 5,000 patients at the hospital, which were all laid to rest in the mass grave, which is still on site. It's also the only record of the murder of Caroline Ansell, who was a patient at the hospital back in 1899. And her sister, Marianne Ansell, who lived in St. Albans, was always kind enough to send Caroline some cakes and treats and things. Unfortunately, they were all laced with phosphorus poisoning. So Mary Jane Ansell was tried in St. Albans for the murder of her sister, and she was hung in July of 1899, being the last woman ever hung in Hertfordshire County. And it's the only written record we know of, comment by the management committee of the hospital that still exists to this day. The item on the right is my personal favorite. That's referred to as the Abbots Langley dollhouse. This is a very, very large and very rare, unique piece of architectural modeling. It's rare for a lot of reasons. One, it has something to do with the hospital, because when the NHS took over in 1948, they were going to build another general hospital on the south side of the park. And so they had a very well-known architectural modelist named Kenneth McCutcheons from Shepherd's Bush, London. And they designed this little architectural model to show what a hospital would have looked like had they built it back in the early 1950s. And this is a rare piece because it is extremely large and they didn't last that long. In fact, we almost lost this piece 3 times. This was heading to the skip until it was recovered from the Vinehouse Surgery in Abbots Langley, who had been nice enough to store it after one of their doctors had gotten it from the hospital. It was donated to the Leavesden Hospital History Association, and it actually spent about 6 years in my living room until we found a place to properly display it. It's a rare piece and very unique because it is large. A lot of them didn't survive that long because they were too big to keep around. It's all handmade. It was made by a very internationally known architect, Kenneth McCutcheon. And each one of the rooms has a little light in there. So you can see the lighting board, the switches on the left-hand side there. That's where all the light switches are and everything. And we figured out sometime later that it was powered by batteries which were stored in the base. So in the wooden base here is all the batteries that used to run this. So we were actually able to move it into the Heritage Center, the Hive Heritage Center, and it was renovated in November of 2019. So hopefully this rare piece will be around for another 75 years. So in 2019, as part of the Leavesden Country Park Heritage Project, the Three Rivers District Council Leisure Department designed and built us the Hive Heritage Center, which stands for Heritage Information, Volunteer and Visiting, and the Environment Center. So this is the center of all things history and heritage in Leavesden Country Park, and it's been a great place to have to store and to display and get all our artifacts out to the public. So we get about anywhere from 20 to 30 visitors every day that we're open. for our open sessions, and people will come in, they'll look at things, and they'll come back later with some memorabilia that they have, or they'll remember something. So the archive keeps increasing. One of the biggest projects that we've been recently worked on, and one that I think means so much to everybody that was involved in it, including the Three Rivers District Council project officers, who really became really super involved in this project, along with a lot of our members and everything, was the Leavesden Asylum Hospital, Chapel of the Good Shepherd, East Lane Cemetery, which existed from 1868 to 1995. So it was located just north of the hospital itself. So, whoops. So this is the main hospital. These are all the buildings and everything. The entire acreage of the hospital was 85 acres, just for the Leavesden Asylum Hospitals. You can see the main administration building here, which is still around. This is the Chapel of the Good Shepherd, which is still there. And this is the Recreation Hall, which was built in 1901. So these are all the buildings. On the right side of the screen is the men's buildings. You can see the men's wards are all here. The women's wards were all here. Everything was definitely segregated and separated. This was one of the tuberculosis wards, which were specially built along with the hospital for the treatment of tuberculosis. This was all this area here was originally the farm field. So they had over 42 acres that they harvested just to feed all the patients and staff in the hospital when it opened in 1870. So it was all self-sufficient because of the farming and operation and everything here. The original cemetery was located right up here, right next to the sewage treatment plant, which inevitably, we believe, led to the cholera epidemic. We believe that one of the sewage pipes that went down to the sewage treatment plant actually burst, and the contaminated sewage got into the water system, the wells, the two aquifers that were located right here. Unfortunately, that was fed back up into the hospital, and the patients and staff were using this, and it caused the cholera epidemic that led to the death of over 5,000 patients and the mass grave. So this is where it all started. You can see the farmer's cottages there, the sewage treatment plant, the original cemetery, which they enlarged in 1868. They had to enlarge it, which is where we believe that, where we have good reason to believe that the mass grave is. The new cemetery started in 1905 or 1906 and went on until the hospital closed in 1995. Unfortunately, going back to about 1959, unfortunately, going back to 1990 or the early 1959, the hospital started to remove and relocate a lot of the headstones and everything. So this is what we found when we first started investigating it. All the headstones had been moved to the back. A lot of them were broken. Numerous headstones were missing. These headstones here are actually located where the mass grave is. You can see in the background there is the old sewage treatment plant and everything. So we didn't have a lot of information about it. In fact, in the early 2000s, 2008, this is what the cemetery looked like at that time. So it had been pretty much not been taken care of. A lot of the grave headstones were missing. All the records for the cemetery had been lost over time because of changes in administration and moving of headstones and different assignments and just not being able to hang on to the records and everything. So we were really at a loss as to just what we were going to find when we started all this. We did have a set of photographs that were taken in 1985 that were donated to us by the Watford Museum. So you can see this is what the cemetery would have looked like. Again, a lot of the headstones and everything are missing, but you can see in the foreground that there are some cremation marker stones there. So we kind of use this as a starting point. When we did our archaeological survey, we started at this point here and just to see what we could find. Now, there were always about maybe 30 headstones or 30 marker stones that you could always see on site, but we really didn't know how many we were going to find. So we filled out all the paperwork and everything, and we got all the permissions, and we worked very closely with Three Rivers District Council about what we were going to do and what kind of information we were looking for. We also worked very closely with the University of York's Archaeological Department and the Discovering England's Burial Sites scheme that they were heading up at the time. So we had a lot of really good experience behind us when we started this. So in January of 2019, we decided to get dirty. So we gathered together about 14 volunteers from the Leavesden Hospital History Association. We trained them in a 4-hour training session on just how to record all the information that we had to bring all this information and history and heritage to life. So we spent 3 very cold, very wet, very muddy days, as you can tell, out in the cemetery doing our survey. And lo and behold, as we started looking around based on just those photographs we had from the Watford Museum, we started to find row after row after row of very neatly laid out cremation marker stones. And at the end of the first day, we had uncovered 310 of them. So we were a little above what we thought we were going to find, about 50, and we ended up finding 310 the first day. At the end of the last day, at the end of the third day, we uncovered a remarkable 510 cremation marker stones, 40 names of patients or staff that were at rest in the cemetery, and 23 monuments were also relocated or located that had been laid all over the area. So now we had all this information and everything. It took me 6 months to put all this information into any kind of readable form. I was also very lucky to find a local genealogist by the name of Jill Durrell, and she spent 6 months researching all the names of all the people that we could find, the whole 573 of them. And she was able to come up with all their backstories, where they were born, what where their parents were born, who their siblings were. And this is the information that had been lost for, well, many years. This information had been lost to the public for over 100 years. So we ended up with 573, but as it happens, when you happen to have somebody who just manages to trip over these things whenever she can, Emma found another one in February of 2021. So we're still finding them even a year after we did the initial survey. So they've all been reinstated. They've all been repaired. We have the list, and we were able to put up a memorial wall. This again was part of the Leavesden Country Park Heritage Project, and the council was very keen on reinstating a wall that was similar to what the original hospital would have looked like. We were able to put up a stone in memory of all the people that were at rest in the cemetery. And it became, once we put all the names and everything together, it became the Leavesden Asylum Hospital, Chapel of the Good Shepherd, East Lane Cemetery Register of Names. It's 61 pages long, contains 574 names and details. And as far as we know, it is the only written record of all the people, or at least these people, that are at rest in the cemetery that exists, because all the other records were gone. So that's pretty much just a real short one. I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to thank all the people responsible for bringing all this history and heritage to light and making it available to everybody. So thank you to Three Rivers District Council leisure officers, Charlotte Gomes, Joe Copley, Lisa Cook, Elaine Johnson, and Emma Drake, the 3rd generation park ranger, to the Watford Museum, and to my very supportive partner in all of this, Emma Frost, and all the members of the Leavesden Hospital History Association. It's really been an emotional experience. We've had, because of all the work that we've been able to do in partnership with Three Rivers District Council, we've really been able to connect people who have been looking for their relatives, who they thought was in the hospital, might have been in the hospital. We've now been able to, because of this register of names, we've now been able to direct them to the hospital and to the last resting place of their relatives. We've had one individual contact us saying that they were looking for 3 of their uncles, which they didn't know they had. We were able to locate the 3 uncles' burial sites. We had one lady contact us that said her father, who she hadn't seen in 35 years, was an employee of the hospital, and through our Facebook group page, she was actually able to locate her father. And so that was pretty good. And that's what makes these kind of projects so important, I think, is there is a big connection to the local community and the people. And that's why we did it. And I just would like to thank the Community Archives and Heritage Group for their support and recognition in all the work that we've done. And I look forward to being a bigger part of the group in the future. Is that it? Did it work?
Thank you, Roger. That was brilliant. Thank you very much. Very good. Big round of applause. Only he can hear me for the but hands going up and clapping. That was really wonderful. Thank you, Martin. Really wonderful. It's funny you say emotional, because I actually found that quite emotional, actually, just listening to you telling this. And I think for us this year with the awards, like I say, you know, we're separating well-being, gathering and preserving, community engagement, but actually all of you are doing really amazing, similar things that overlap with each other, and you know.
It wasn't just, it wasn't just the history and heritage of one thing, you know, I concentrated on Leafson Asylum, Leafson Hospital, but when we started getting into it, it became very obvious to not only myself, but Three Rivers District Council that there's a lot more heritage and history in this community of Abbots Langley and Leavesden and North Watford. And that's where we got into really, you know, looking into recognizing the aerodrome and the film studios, because they've been such a big part of the local community. You can't talk to anybody that lives in those areas that didn't have a family member that worked at Rolls-Royce or the hospital, or, you know, has a connection to these things. And as I mentioned before, one of the things I was most concerned with was all this knowledge, all this oral history, which is another thing I didn't get to mention, is both Three Rivers District Council and myself have embarked on an oral history recording. So I've gone out and spoken and recorded at least, I think I have 47 interviews with people who used to work at the hospital. And like when you remember Hugh's presentation, actually hearing people tell their stories is so much different than reading it in a book or having, I mean, to hear their words and for them to be able to tell their stories in their own words is a real treat. And we have to capture those, because like I'm finding out, a lot of the people that have a history with the hospital aren't getting any younger. Mm-hmm. And if we don't record this history, if we don't get this all down somewhere, you know, we're going to lose it. And that would be horrible. So I'm just looking if I could just, Alec, is it okay if I go to the questions?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, Roger has just asked, as a young man, I lived near Uxbridge and later worked in Northwood, so fairly local. How big an area did patients come from? In regards to the Leavesden Asylum, it was built north of London because it was supposed to take the catchment of North London and anything north of that. So the St. Lawrence Asylum in Caterham was on the south side of London. So they were the two sister facilities that were built. So we would have people from, well, anywhere really, North London, Northwood, Pinner, you know, Rickmansworth, as far up as Camden Town. We have one professor at Oxford University who researched 3 patients that came from Camden Town to Leavesden, but they would come from all over. So the catchment was kind of north of London, but they would come as far from as Liverpool, or anybody that needed to find a facility to take care of a loved one or themselves would usually end up in a place like that. So.
Brilliant. I'm just looking for more questions for you, but it just seems to be people saying how fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Elaine's there.
Yeah.
Yes, and we're going to be continuing on, but like most history groups, and the Clemens Hall History Group, they just mentioned it is space. We really only have a small portion of our archives and memorabilia and artifacts and everything on display for the public. So space is always a problem for small groups like ours and everything. We are going more on the virtual world. So our website is being built every day. We're adding things to it. So people will be able to access all the archives and everything, and primarily the register of names. So if somebody's looking, they find our website, they can actually go to the register. They can look to see if a relative is there. And I'm kind of thinking that seems to be the way going in the future, is putting a lot of it, virtually. I mean, we've had two very, very successful Heritage Day events, which the Community Arts Development Officer from Three Rivers District Council, Elaine Johnson, has organized in the past, 2016, 2017. And I have to say that because I've just noticed she's with us here. So I've just seen her name. So I have to say something nice about her, because I want her to do more of them. But we are planning, hopefully planning one for 2022. So we'll be able again to bring this all to life and everything. One of the other ways that we really found out was really fascinating to draw people in, not only going out to the schools and everything, which we've done quite a bit of, although it's a little difficult to get into the schools because we have to match their curriculum so exactly at the right time and the right subject and everything. So, but when we have these events, is the living history walks. Now I've been doing the walks since 2009, and luckily I have Emma, who's going to be taking them over for me. But the Heritage Days that we do, the living history. So we would get people together, dress up in costume, and we actually would portray characters that we knew the history of that used to work at the asylum, and people find that absolutely fascinating. So that's just another way that working with creative people like Elaine, we can do things a little different and make history a bit more fun and a bit more interesting for people. So
oh, that's brilliant.
I can't see any more questions. So.
No, I can't. Does anyone have any questions? Anybody want to unmute or stick a hand up? Or I don't think so. No. Huge congratulations going on there, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's lovely.
Lots of people very inspired. No. Well, if there are no more questions, I guess that kind of brings it to me to bring the evening to a close, really. Jane's popping up, so I'll rope her in. That's lovely. But no, I have to say, I mean, I'm not sure how long I've been involved in the awards, but I've just found this year really exciting. And as I say, this kind of crossover, even though we're looking at different things, how everybody is doing such amazing, everybody's involved in wellbeing, everybody's gathering, preserving, and everybody's engaging with groups of people in amazing ways. So it was, just such an interesting year. It sounds very melodramatic, but I found it very inspiring. It's been very inspiring for me to see what you're all doing, and this evening's been very much like that as well. So I don't know if you've any final words you'd like to add in, Jane or Martin or
No, I'm good. I just, I really have to say that I was really happy to find the Community Archives and Heritage Group, because unfortunately, sometimes if you're not a big museum, and you don't have the certification and everything, it's hard to get recognized for what you're doing and get financial support and all the rest of it. So to have you guys and the membership that you have in the UK and Ireland is absolutely great for us small little groups. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I think that's what we strive to be about, isn't it, Jane? And this is why, going forward, I mean, we usually use the AGM in the conference as a kind of appeal for people to get more involved and to give us your voice, really, because as I say, we're all doing very similar things, and we're all doing very different things with different groups and communities, and the more it sounds like a cliche, but the more you put into the group and the more you're part of it, the more we can do and hopefully get everybody's voice heard. So thank you, all of you.
Just one quick question, because I've just seen Sue there. Sue, is the hall open? Is it accessible? Because I live up in York now, so I thought I might stop by and say hi.
It's not open generally for us, but if you email us, we'll meet up.
Oh, lovely. Yes. Yeah, definitely. Let's do that.
There you go. See, Cash bringing people together. That's what it's all about.
Yes, that's it.
Lovely.
Okay, well, I'll just say a final few words then. And it's great that all these connections are being made. And it has really been very inspiring and humbling to hear of the work of all of the groups, and all the presentations have been excellent. So thank you to all of you. Thank you to everybody who's contributed. And thank you to Alan and everyone involved in bringing this evening together. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.